I wanted to share a video on a propane conversion for a generator. I've done about 6 of these now, conversion kits for family members, but I'm going to try something with my own. The issue with the setup, whether it's gasoline or propane, you're not supposed to have anything plugged in to the generator when you start it up or when you shut it down. The issue is when you run out of fuel, be it propane or gasoline, the machine shuts off in the middle of the night or during the day, and that could damage my appliances, so I have a concern about that. So what I'm looking to do is set up a automatic changeover for my propane system. I initially was going to have a 100-pound cylinder. The issue with that was going to be if, let's say, it'll run 5 days and I use 2 days of it and then the power comes back on, do I hope that the next power outage will be 3 days or less, or do I go ahead and refill that partial tank and pay for a full tank? So instead I have 3 40-pound tanks or 40-gallon tanks, 3 30s and 3 20s, so I can run off of them. But I'm going to set it up to where it will do an automatic changeover. The system I got came from US Carburation, and I have it set up where I can run either one of my generators off of it. But what you get from US Carburation is this regulator. I'm told it's 100 to 250 psi in the tank. This takes it down to be between 10 and 15 psi. So that regulates the pressure. Then the propane goes into another regulator that's actually a demand regulator, not the pressure, but the volume. And how that works, there's a diaphragm inside there, and when the engine starts, the vacuum opens up that diaphragm and allows the propane to flow through and into the generator. If the generator shuts off, that diaphragm closes, and as a safety item, shuts off the propane that's going out the hose. You can also, they call this a load block. That's actually where you set the volume of propane that comes out of the diaphragm and into your machine. It's actually kind of like an old school gasoline carburetor where you could actually adjust the mixture. And how you do that is there's a lock nut on here and then this little screw that you screw in. And once you've got the machine running for the first time, when you've converted it, you just dial that in to where the machine's running at optimal performance. And then there's a lock nut that you lock, and that's the last time you have to adjust that. I actually put a wing nut on mine because I need to adjust that more often, whether I'm running the small machine or the big machine. This one obviously takes a lot less fuel, so I put a wing nut on it. What I'm going to do, or what I'm going to attempt to do, they make a dual stage or 2-stage regulator that goes for RVs. And what that is it will sit between the 2 tanks and have a feeder line from both tanks into the regulator. And when one tank goes dead, it automatically switches to the other tank. So you never run out of fuel. The machine never stops. Another advantage to it is when that first tank goes dry, you can go ahead and run on the second, unhook the first tank, go fill it, bring it back, introduce it into the system, and when the second tank runs out, it'll automatically switch over to the first tank. A question I'm having on this is whether or not, because the new system will be a dual stage or 2-stage regulator, whether it will provide enough propane to run especially the big machine. I believe that it will. The information I found online says that that regulator works with RVs that have generators on them. The big one is a 5,000 constant, 6250 surge. Most generators on RVs are going to be that size or bigger. So I think it's going to work fine. I'm going to temporarily plumb everything in and make sure that it works. If it does, and I truly believe it will, then I'll build some type of bracketry that I can put between the 2 tanks and run both of them. I'm also going to, when I do that, make it so it will just sit on one tank in case I want to take the generator down to storage building or to a friend's house or something and just run it for an hour or two to help with the project. Won't need to drag 2 tanks along. The system that I'm going to put on it is made that you can unhook one tank and it'll still run just fine on the other one. So we'll see. It should be here in a day or two. That'll be the second video. Here is what I ended up with. I got this, it's a Duraflame, and I got it from just this regulator and hoses from Home Depot. It was $40, and then had to buy some brass fittings, put a elbow down here, a little nipple and an elbow, and then a longer nipple to get out to my demand regulator. And I was going to build an elaborate setup to hang this thing on the tank, and I ended up using just the bracket that came with it. Just drilled the holes down a couple inches more so that I get a little bit more hanging on the side of the tank. That way there's not going to be any vibration because of the hose, but just so that there's a little more meat there hanging on the tank. So it'll just hang on the side of the tank, and it works just fine. I only hooked it up to the big one, and I'll show you that in a minute. But I figured if it had enough, and I will check it on the small one, but I figured if it had enough volume and pressure for the big one, it'll certainly do the small one. So on YouTube, you can see how to use this. The only thing that they do recommend is that it has to be up above the tanks. So my setup works fine there too. And when I unhook it, it all just lifts off for storage. So I'm going to start the generator up. Right now this will be my primary tank, and then I'm going to slowly turn the fuel off on this one, and you'll see the machine just keeps running and runs off the other tank. And then I could, if this tank were in fact truly empty, switch this over to where this is now the primary tank, and I can unhook and remove this tank and go fill it. And then when you bring that tank full, just hook it back in. This one is still the primary tank. When it runs out and there's an indicator on the regulator, then it'll automatically switch over to this one. And then I can unhook that one and go fill it. But with this setup, I'm never going to run out of fuel. Like I said, I got 220s, or 320s, 330s, and 340s. And when one runs out, it'll just switch over to the other one. And so it's going to save me the $40 for the regulator, just in not having to fill partial tanks. You know, if I'm getting near the evening and we're getting ready to go to bed and I'm only at half or a third of a tank, I got to switch that tank out so it'll finish running the whole night and go fill that partial tank. So I won't be able to talk because this thing is really loud, but I'm going to start it all up, and then this is my primary tank, and I'll slowly turn that one off, and you'll see it just keeps right on running. And then I will turn both tanks off, and the machine will die, and it's ready for storage. So let me get it fired up and we'll show you. Once I turn both tanks off, it only runs for about 30 seconds or so. So this is a great setup. I'm very pleased with it. I'm glad that it worked just the way that I thought and hoped it would. I converted my first one of these 10 years ago. Don't know why, I never thought of this. I haven't seen anybody else on YouTube that has hooked one of these up to a propane generator. So I'm just real pleased with it. Not a lot of money, and if we do have another long outage, I can just have both tanks hooked up, and I'm never going to run out of power. And by that not shutting off with stuff plugged into it, it's going to save my appliances and not do any damage that way. And it's worth the $40. I'll save that, like I said, in not having to pay the full price to fill partial tanks. So I wanted to share. If you got any questions, leave them in the comments. Some people ask, how long will a tank run? And that all depends on the size of the generator you're running, what you're running on it, you know, refrigerators, freezers, that type of thing. But most importantly, the outside air temperature. In the winter, these tanks won't convert as much of the liquid gas to vapor, where they will in the summer. So you can't really say how long a tank will last. But with this setup, it doesn't matter. When one runs out, it'll switch right over to the second. You can go refill the first one. Thought I'd share. Thank you.